Have you ever tried to run away from something God asked you to do? Have you ever felt that a responsibility seemed too big, too hard, or even too unfair for you to carry? That is exactly how the story of Jonah begins, a prophet who dared to defy the direct command of the Creator. Jonah lived in Israel, a land constantly struggling against enemy nations. Among these enemies was Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire. A city famous not only for its size but also for its cruelty. Historical records spoke of bloodthirsty armies, rulers who spread terror, and practices that no one in Israel would ever want to imagine happening to their own people. And it was to this place that God sent Jonah. "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach against it, for their wickedness has come up before me," said the Lord. It was a clear, direct command, leaving no room for misunderstanding. But in Jonah's heart, there was no willingness. There was fear, prejudice, and perhaps even anger. Why should he bring God's message to a people who only deserved judgment? So Jonah made a decision that would change the course of his life. He would not go to Nineveh. On the contrary, he decided to run. Instead of obeying, he went down to Joppa, a busy port city, and found a ship bound for Tarshish. To grasp the weight of this choice, imagine the map of that time. Nineveh was to the east, but Tarshish, most likely in the region of Spain, was to the far west. In other words, Jonah chose the most distant route possible, as if he were trying to cross the world to escape the presence of God. He paid his fare, boarded the ship, and as the sailors prepared the sails, Jonah took a deep breath, perhaps believing he had escaped. What a deceptive relief! A man may try to run from God's calling, but there is no distance that can hide anyone from his eyes. The journey began peacefully. The gentle rocking of the waves carried the vessel forward. The sailors chatted in different languages, transporting goods to distant lands. But suddenly, the sky darkened. The wind howled with fury. The sea, once calm, turned into a raging monster. The storm crashed down upon the ship like judgment itself. The sailors, men seasoned by danger, were terrified. Each one cried out to his own God. They began throwing cargo overboard to lighten the load, but nothing worked. The waves threatened to tear the ship apart. In the middle of the chaos, they searched for every crew member. And where was Jonah? Fast asleep, as if nothing were happening. The captain shook him awake with a shout, "Get up! Call on your God. Perhaps he will take notice of us so that we will not perish." The crew then cast lots to discover who was responsible for this disaster. The lot fell on Jonah. Pressed for answers, he confessed, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. I am running away from his command." The sailors were struck with fear. How could anyone dare to disobey such a mighty God? Jonah, with a heavy look, suggested, "Throw me into the sea, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault this great storm has come upon you." The sailors rowed hard, desperately trying to reach land, but the sea raged all the more. Finally, they prayed, "Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man. For you, Lord, have done as you pleased." Then, with trembling hands, they threw Jonah overboard. And instantly, as if a switch had been flipped, the sea grew calm. The wind stopped. The waves stilled. Silence fell. The sailors, awestruck, offered sacrifices and made vows to the God of Israel. Meanwhile, Jonah sank into the dark waters. He thought it was the end. But what he didn't know was that his true journey had only just begun. The waters closed over Jonah's head. The piercing cold of the sea invaded his body as he sank deeper and deeper. The little air left in his lungs seemed to vanish in seconds. The silence of the ocean was broken only by the distant roar of the waves above. His heavy body was dragged downward, and in his mind swirled a mixture of fear and resignation. This is the end. I disobeyed the God of heaven, and now I pay the price. But suddenly, something massive moved in the depths. A colossal shadow drew near. A tremor rippled through the waters as if even the sea itself feared the creature. Then, with the force of a storm, an enormous mouth opened before him. Jonah barely had time to grasp what was happening before he was swallowed whole. Darkness, silence, stifling dampness. Jonah was alive, inside a great fish. Picture the scene: pulsing organic walls surrounding him, the constant sound of water mixed with the heavy breathing of the creature. The stench was unbearable, and the darkness absolute. There was no way out. For the first time, the prophet who ran from God could run no longer. And here the story takes on mystery and tension. Many wonder, but how could anyone survive inside a fish? Curiously, ancient Middle Eastern cultures told of giant sea creatures as symbols of divine judgment. In Jonah's narrative, the fish is not merely an animal. It is God's instrument. It came not to destroy him, but to preserve him. A living prison, a womb of darkness, where Jonah would have enough time to reflect. For 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah remained there. 3 days, a number that, in biblical tradition, always points to decisive moments between death and life, despair and hope. Inside the fish, the prophet began to pray. It was not a calm prayer. It was a cry of the soul, a confession heavy with repentance. He remembered the waters that nearly consumed him, the abyss that surrounded him, yet he also recognized that even there, God had heard him. From the depths of Sheol I called, and you heard my voice. Words that echo through the centuries, revealing that there is no place so dark, so deep, that it lies beyond the reach of divine mercy. Meanwhile, on the outside, the sea carried on peacefully, as if nothing had happened. The ship with the sailors sailed onward, now manned by men forever changed by their encounter with the God of Israel. But Jonah, the reluctant prophet, was living the most radical experience of his life. Trapped in the belly of a fish, surrounded by the impossible, yet sustained by a hope that was beginning to rise out of the darkness. And you, have you ever felt trapped in a place with no escape, surrounded by mistakes and bad choices, believing it was the end? Jonah's story reminds us that sometimes it is precisely at rock bottom, or in the belly of the fish, that God meets us to write a new beginning. Jonah lay on the sand, his body trembling, his lungs burning with the salty air of freedom. The waves retreated behind him, as if erasing the chapter of his disobedience. He was alive, because God had not abandoned him even in the depths of the sea. On that beach, drenched, exhausted, yet restored, Jonah knew there was no longer any room for excuses. The God who had pursued him across the earth and into the depths of the waters had given him a second chance. And once again, the voice came, clear, sovereign, irresistible. Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and proclaim to it the message I give you. This time, Jonah did not run. He staggered to his feet, sand clinging to his tunic, and with each shaky step, he moved toward the destiny he had once tried to escape. Days passed as he crossed the vast roads, deserts, and fields that led to Assyria. Each step was heavy with memory. The storm, the terrified sailors, the suffocating darkness of the fish's belly. But each step also carried a growing conviction. The God of Israel had not given up on him. He could not give up on God's mission. Finally, the horizon revealed the silhouette of Nineveh. And what a sight it was! Historians describe it as one of the largest cities of the ancient world. Walls so wide that 3 chariots could ride abreast on top of them, gates that seemed to touch the sky, towers rising like spears of stone. Inside, the noise of thousands of voices, the smell of spices, livestock, sweat, and burning incense filled the air. It was a city alive, restless, and yet, under heaven's eyes, a city doomed. Jonah entered cautiously. To the Israelites, Nineveh was not only foreign, it was the embodiment of cruelty and oppression. These were the people whose armies had invaded, enslaved, and mocked nations. To stand in their streets and cry out against them was more than risky. It was almost suicidal. And yet, Jonah walked forward, propelled by the weight of God's command. He lifted his voice. It cut through the marketplace like a blade, 40 days more, and Nineveh shall be overthrown." The words startled those nearby. Merchants froze, children clutched their mothers, guards frowned with suspicion. The foreign man, his face weathered by sea and desert, spoke with a fire that no ordinary messenger could carry. He was not selling goods. He was proclaiming doom. But something remarkable happened. Instead of laughter or anger, the people listened. One whispered to another, and soon the murmurs spread through the crowd. Eyes widened. Hearts trembled. For beneath Jonah's words was a force invisible but undeniable, the power of God's Spirit piercing conscience after conscience. The news reached the nobles, and eventually the palace itself. The king of Nineveh, draped in royal splendor, heard the prophecy. This was no ordinary warning. This was a verdict from the God who commands the seas and the earth. And in an act no one would have predicted, the king rose from his throne, removed his royal robe, and covered himself with sackcloth. He sat in ashes, a symbol of total surrender. A decree went out across the land. Let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock taste anything. Let them not feed, nor drink water. But let man and beast be covered with sackcloth, and let them call mightily unto God. Let everyone turn from his evil way and from the violence that is in his hands. Who knows? God may yet relent and turn from his fierce anger, so that we perish not. Imagine the scene. An entire empire, from king to beggar, dressed in humility, bowing their heads in repentance. Streets once filled with arrogance now echoed with cries for mercy. Even the animals were clothed in sackcloth, as if creation itself joined the chorus of desperation. Never before had such a radical response been seen from a message so brief. But that is the mystery of divine power. A few words, spoken at the right time, can break the hardest of hearts. And heaven heard. God saw their actions, their fasting, their turning from violence, their cries, and he relented. The judgment he had announced did not fall. The city was spared. Nineveh, that symbol of cruelty, tasted grace. But for Jonah, this moment would stir a new conflict inside his soul. He had obeyed, he had spoken, and the people had repented. Yet, instead of rejoicing, something else began to rise within him. A storm not of the sea this time, but of the heart. Jonah left the walls of Nineveh carrying an open wound. Behind him, the city celebrated the silence of a judgment that never came. But within him burned a fire of incomprehension. The prophet who had announced destruction now saw only repentance and life. He climbed to a high place and built a fragile shelter out of dry branches. From there, his eyes remained fixed on the city gates, as if still waiting for fire to fall from the sky. Yet instead of judgment, came shade. God caused a plant to grow, rising quickly at his side, covering him from the scorching sun. Jonah found relief beneath its broad leaves, and for a moment his weary soul experienced comfort. But that same night brought the worm. By morning, the plant withered, and with it the relief was gone. The hot desert wind replaced the shadow, burning his skin and his heart. Between anger and exhaustion, Jonah was confronted with a lesson he could not control. The compassion of God does not bow to human measures. Nineveh had received grace. The prophet, however, remained bound by the weight of his own sense of justice. Between a plant that lasted a single day and an entire city that found life, Jonah revealed the conflict of every human heart, to desire mercy for oneself but relentless justice for the other. The narrative ends open. The prophet falls silent, and the last word belongs to God. Because the question does not belong only to Jonah, but to all of us. Do we accept mercy when it reaches those we consider unworthy? Nineveh lived because God loved. Jonah was lost in his silence. And the story leaves us with a choice: to dwell in the narrow shadow of pride, or to rest under the vastness of grace.